Teach me about the Great Lakes. Teach me about the Great Lakes. Welcome back to Teach Me About the Great Lakes, a twice monthly podcast in which I, a Great Lakes novice, ask people who are smarter and harder working than I am to teach me all about the Great Lakes. My name is Stuart Carlton. I work with Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, and I know a lot about high levels of cringe and low levels of riz. But I don't know a lot about the Great Lakes, and that is the point of this here show. I'm so happy today to be joined by the one, the only, the lake lover herself, Megan Gunn. Megan, how's your lake life?
My lake life is non-existent right now, but lake life soon. It's the time of year where I get to go where I was born and spend a lot of time by Lake Michigan.
Lake Michigan this time of year? It's too cold. Do you go in it?
I don't have to go in it, no. But there's so much beauty outside of the lake, so I just watch the sunset, especially because it sunsets before my bedtime now.
Yes, that's the Indiana thing, right? It's nothing like reading a book at 9:30 at night outside with a cocktail and no light. All right. Well, anyway, I'm super pumped. So this episode was supposed to be our annual Season of Giving episode, right? That we do as a makeup for the most navel-gazing, ridiculous thing we do each year, which is our Lake House of Terror. Lake House, yeah. Challenge with that is we didn't do the Lake House of Terror this year. So we have nothing to make up for. And so that said, though, we still found a very cool nonprofit. We like to feature nonprofits around the Great Lakes. And so we found a very cool one to talk to. So we are going to talk to some people from that lake. But first, here's this music. Thank you for that one, Carolyn. Our guests today are Jill Ryan and Ann Baughman. Jill is the executive director and Ann Baughman, the associate director, so higher ranked than I am, of Freshwater Future. Jill and Ann, welcome, and thank you for joining us on Teach Me About the Great Lakes.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Okay, so let's start big picture. Freshwater Future. So y'all are a nonprofit. I see you're in Petoskey, Michigan, home of the famous Stones. What is it that y'all do exactly, Jill?
Well, Freshwater Future helps communities around the entire Great Lakes Basin to protect their own water resources. Everything from the big lakes to inland lakes and streams and groundwater and drinking water.
What does it look like to protect these water resources?
It looks like people really getting involved with their drinking water systems and how those systems are operated and whether they're operating as efficiently and effectively as they could. It also means things like paying attention to what's happening in your backyard so that if a big proposal is coming in for a large water withdrawal or oil and gas or other kind of drilling or resource extraction, you're paying attention to that and getting engaged to make sure that your voice is heard as those processes move forward.
I love that.
And so is that a lot of policy action, Ann, or is it more like working house to house to help people either adapt in some way or install technologies or what does that look like exactly?
Great question. So the way we do it at Freshwater Future is we have a few different programs and services that we help communities. One of those is grants. We provide small grants, particularly for groups to do advocacy. So really to speak out, make sure our regulations are enforced, decision makers are educated, making good decisions, hopefully. And those are offered a couple times of the year. Then we also have capacity building, where we help groups be better organizations. We need groups all around the Great Lakes region. We need them to be paying attention. They know their resources better than anyone else, so we need to know what's going on. So we help them to thrive and be good organizations. That could be anything from how to become a 501c3. It might be how do they do fundraising. It might be how to do campaigns. And then we also do get involved in policy as well. So we listen to our community groups. We consider them our partners. So we listen to them, we pay attention, and we try to help out where we have the capacity and the ability to try to make a difference in policy, whether it's local, state, or federal level.
I think that capacity piece is really important. We're doing some work, well, I'm not, but a colleague of ours, Kara Salazar, is doing a lot of work to try to help communities who just, especially oftentimes smaller communities, right? They don't have the ability, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the time to work on this sort of stuff. So what kind of capacity work do y'all do exactly? Can you give some specific examples?
Yeah, it's really personalized consulting is what we do. So we, work with our groups. We figure out what their needs are, and then we work with them one-on-one to try to build their skill level or provide them training or help them to actually do some of the work.
That includes things like actually helping them write a strategic plan for their organization.
Okay.
Or maybe help them with a fundraising plan or how to write a campaign plan. So there are many things that we can help groups with, but it's always tailored to that individual group. And I think that's one of the things that makes Freshwater Future a bit unique in that consulting space. We also work with about 2,000 groups across the region. So in the 8 Great Lakes states and Ontario, we have 2,000 groups we're working with. And so we learn a lot as we go. And that's a pretty unique thing, too, to be able to learn from that many community efforts.
So how do you do that at scale? How do you provide personalized advice to 2,000 groups or whatever on a consulting basis? Because I assume you don't have 2,000 agents out there. Or if you do, let's talk about your funding situation and how you pull that off. But so what is the secret to providing, as personalized advice as you can on that scale?
Well, we clearly don't work with all 2,000 at a time in our consulting work. But one of the things we do is we often link our funding with our capacity help. So while they have a grant, they might be able to also get help in implementing that grant. But also, we do have about 12 people across the basin, and we're working with people sometimes in a training event. So that might help 100 groups. A lot of times we do things on webinars, and that might help 20 groups. And then as we find from that there are specific, more in-depth needs, then we go to what does this particular group need over a little bit longer period of time, and how do we manage that? So, we're working with them all at different levels.
That's interesting. Are there some specific projects you could highlight for our listeners that are kind of the key examples of what it is you're trying to do?
I think we helped to build something called the Flint Community Water Lab. And so after the city of Flint had such terrible water crisis, one of the things that we heard when we went to see if there was a way we could help was that people were not going to drink the water again. They did not trust the water, and we felt that was a huge harm to individuals, because not to be able to trust your tap is so harmful, to have to use bottled water. So we worked with the community to figure out how could we help ensure that the community can trust that water. And so through a long period of working with local leaders, a trusted community center, and we were able to pull together a pilot and then eventually the lab with local partners, of course, not just us, so that now there's a fully functioning, certified community water lab with Flint residents running the lab. You can show up and watch your sample be analyzed, and it's all free.
No good.
All free to the whole community of Flint. And I think that's definitely one of our proudest achievements, was
awesome.
Really going from thinking of it to implementing it.
That is amazing. And so now, because I think about the Flint water all the time, right? Because it got to a crisis mode, but there are probably other places out there, right, that haven't got into crisis yet. And so that idea of trust, and how do you trust the water is something, especially in this era of PFAS. I'm holding up my water bottle here. I fill this thing about 4 times a day, not because I'm some sort of water health guru, but because it's the virtuous triangle between my office, the water fountain, and the bathroom. I just, right.
There you go.
And as I chug all of this water, I'm like, what exactly am I drinking here? But Ann, Yeah.
Maybe, Ann, you want to talk a little bit about some of our lead program and how we help people with that question.
Yeah, exactly. So because lead is such a big issue, Freshwater Future is pretty involved in the entire Great Lakes region. One of the things we've been doing is actually paying attention to the information that comes from regulators about which communities are out of compliance with the lead and copper rule, which means they have found through testing that they have elevated levels of lead. And one of the things we found is communities don't do a very good job of informing and educating and reaching people about that. So we've been using social media to really reach out to targeted populations where they might have an elevated level of lead to make sure people know that that's what the current situation is, and then how they can keep their families safe. Mm-hmm. So making sure that they know how to flush their water after it's been sitting for 6 hours, that they know it's a good idea to use a filter. And filters are fairly inexpensive. So to use a filter to make sure they keep their family safe. And also that they always run cold water through that filter. We also have an entire toolkit on our website with additional information that people can access to learn more about how to keep their families safe from lead. So that's just one of the things that we've been doing.
You also do work on climate. Is that right, Ann? That's kind of one of your areas of specialty. What kind of stuff are y'all doing in terms of climate resilience?
Yeah, we've been involved in climate resilience for quite a while. And one of our current efforts is really focused on helping communities really address flooding, localized flooding, mm-hmm. and coming up with community-driven solutions. So in Detroit, we're working with several community groups. They're using, most of them are using an app to document and collect information really cool. about where flooding is occurring. And then we can help them map that data and then produce reports that they can share with decision makers to say, look, we've collected this data over the last year. It's flooded in this one location 4 times. Mm-hmm. It's causing problems for the residents. It's causing problems on the road. What are you going to do about it? It doesn't mean that we get the solutions real quickly, but those community groups are really gathering that data and being able to voice their concerns in a way that they can then say, this is what we want as well. We want you to fix this, but we also want some green infrastructure here to make our neighborhood more beautiful and to also make the aesthetics nicer, as well as collecting and treating stormwater. So that's an exciting project, and it takes a lot of data, though, and a lot of time.
Yeah, that's really cool. So how do you get people, I think about this a lot with community science or citizen science, as other people call it, type of things. How do you get people to actually collect the data beyond, the initial rush? Have y'all had any successful examples of that? And what are the secrets?
Well, good question. We struggle with that too, right? So, especially when you're looking at flooding data, because it changes. Detroit has had major rain events almost every year, but they're not always in the same location. Mm-hmm. So your location in Jefferson Chalmers may have had the big flood in 21, but then you've only had minor ones since then, right? So it is hard to keep those community groups engaged. I think one of the ways we do it, though, is we just develop really meaningful relationships. We really build strong partnerships with our groups. So we listen to them. They might want to pivot on certain issues, and we try to support them with that as well. And hopefully we'll come back to the flooding when the next rain event comes, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that. Like when you get the people to become involved and be a part of that, taking the action, they have more buy-in to whatever the solutions could be, because they have been a part of collecting that data and making a change.
And they know what the better solutions are, right? Mm-hmm. They know where the green infrastructure should go. They know what residents need their downspouts disconnected. They know, where the areas are being flooded the most. And so, mm-hmm. We really have to trust the residents.
So I have a question thinking about this. So y'all do a ton of, first of all, before we get here, y'all do a ton of work across the Great Lakes. And I want every visitor right now to go to, every listener, to go to freshwaterfuture.org, O-R-G. And they're in orange, brown, in this kind of a University of Texas orange. I want you to click on that donate button. and then I want you to make a donation. We don't charge anything. We don't have advertising. We don't ask much. Just click on a dang link and give a little donation to help make a real difference in people's lives. But so thinking about the breadth of stuff they all work on in terms of water, threats to people in their water, do you think you could come up for our listeners with a top 3 or top 5 threats that we should be worried about to our water? Is that a doable thing? Here, each you write 1 or 2 down, and then we'll go back and forth. This is what we'll do, and we'll do it. Oh, I got this. Don't worry. I know exactly. This is going to go perfectly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have I'm going to say number 5, and we'll have a drum roll, and then you'll say the number, and then I'll give like a little sound effect, and then you'll tell me why it's such a big threat. And whenever we do this, it works perfectly. It's not at all confusing. Nobody looks like an idiot. Actually, the only person who looks like an idiot is me, so it's all fine. All right, so does that work?
Sure.
The number 5 threat to people's water in the Great Lakes is...
Resource extraction.
Oh, no, there we go. Now, tell me why resource extraction. That's not what I would have guessed, so this is interesting.
Yeah, so as we have to dig for metals to make batteries, for example, all of those things have big water implications. You have to often fill wetlands. You have to do something with the waste brine that comes out of those drilling wells. You have to manage basically forever the toxic waste that comes out after you extract the metals from the rock you're trying to get it from. So those are really big processes that have a big impact on water resources and can really impact drinking water. People don't often connect those two, but because all water is connected, those toxins can flow from groundwater to surface water to rivers. So resource extraction is a really big concern.
I had not thought about that at all.
Now, they don't drill for oil and stuff like that in the Great Lakes, right? But they do it in this. They drill for minerals and aggregate, all kind of stuff in the surrounding area, right?
Well, they drill. They don't drill within the lakes themselves, except Canada. In the U.S., there is a ban on drilling in the Great Lakes. But in our Great Lakes states, there is all kinds of drilling. And then there is also our metals there are a lot of metals in the top tier of the Great Lakes. So the upper part of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota all have a lot of minerals buried. Oh. And so those are places that we're very concerned about.
All right. And the number 4 threat to people's water in the Great Lakes is...
harmful algal blooms.
These are near and dear to our hearts. Yeah. Tell us about harmful algal blooms and if y'all are doing anything to help people with them.
Well, we are, and you might know more about them than me, but...
Oh, I don't, but I work with people who do.
We are definitely very involved in trying to address the issues with nutrient pollution in Lake Erie, as well as all around the Great Lakes. All 5 Great Lakes had harmful algal blooms last summer. And so it's time that we start looking at, what do we really need to do to prevent that nutrient pollution. But Lake Erie in particular, we're really focused. We have a few partners there that we work closely with that really we need to start addressing manure management. It's really that simple. We've invested billions of dollars into farms to help them voluntarily reduce nutrients, and it's not making a difference. It's not working. And the permitting process for large factory farms it creates lots of problems. So there's lots of opportunities there. Lake Erie might be the smallest, but it's one of the most important Great Lakes, and it deserves to be clean as well.
Yeah, it's a top 5 Great Lake. You can actually hear, if you want to hear a really awkward interview with me and David Rock, the director of the Erie Situation, who did a whole film about algal blooms in Lake Erie. You can go to teachmeaboutthe.greatlakes.com 74/74. And the title of that one is, It Depends on How You Do a One. So I don't know what we were talking about at that point. All right, Jill, the number 3 threat to my drinking water in the Great Lakes is...
Water withdrawals.
I can't believe we're still doing this. Okay. Tell me about water withdrawals, Jill.
So the Great Lakes system is just that. It's a system, and it's a balanced system.
Mm-hmm.
The Great Lakes were created 10,000 years ago by glaciers. They were dug out by the glaciers, and then the melting glaciers filled in those holes with water. And we can't just take out unlimited amounts of water and think that it will be replaced. Only about 1% is replaced by precipitation, snow and rain every year, but also about 1% is lost through the shipping canal out to the ocean, and also through evaporation and uses. So we do have to pay attention to how we use this water. We have to be conservative, even though when we look out at those amazing Great Lakes, it seems like it's limitless. It is not. And so those withdrawals, especially as we become a thirstier nation, with some areas of the country not having adequate water supplies increasingly, we really have to pay attention to how we're using it and keeping it in its place. One of the things I really like to say about the Great Lakes is that these waters are special because of where they are. If you take the components and bust that up into little bottles of water and ship it around the world, you don't have Great Lakes anymore. And so I really think that, keeping this sense of place that we know in the Great Lakes and keeping this integrity of this water resource is really important. So we have to look at those water withdrawals.
I like that you mentioned that. It does make a huge difference. I went to a talk at a conference recently, and they were mentioning how they were planning to do water withdrawals, but they would input it back in a certain amount of cycles to have different tide changes like the ocean does. And I was like, and they were thinking that it wasn't going to have an impact on the ecosystem. I was sitting in the corner like, this is going to have a huge impact. And you all aren't thinking about all the things that it could impact. You're just thinking about extracting the water. And so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's so true. And right now, one of the big things that water withdrawals are being used for, these ones are being put back, just like you said, but they're often put back warm. So when they need water for cooling, they put it through the system, and there is a way to do that with a loop, but it's more expensive, so most don't. They just keep taking new water and putting it back in the source water warmer than they took it. And that has huge implications for things like algae, for things like the native species who want to live in that area. It just doesn't work. So you're right. It has huge implications for the system.
All right, Ann. The number 2 threat to our drinking water of the Great Lakes is...
Toxic chemicals.
Yeah.
Toxic chemicals. This is a big topic, toxic chemicals. What ones are you thinking about these days?
Well, I think, what's on everybody's mind is PFAS, right? You cannot get away from it. And, we've been involved in that issue since before it was an issue. And I think the problem with PFAS, of course, is they're in thousands of products. We're still making those products. We're still using those products. And so until we stop making them, we're not going to make a dent. But we've used them for, 40 years or plus. And so the amount that's already in our system now, both in groundwater and surface water, and we know it's in the rain and in precipitation, I think it's just going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with in the future. We want our drinking water sources to be clean and safe. It's going to probably require some type of filtration. Right now, that filtration is cost prohibitive for most systems to be able to do, for every system in the Great Lakes or in the country to do. So we're going to have to come up with some more innovative solutions to how do we make that affordable so that we can remove these chemicals from our water.
But with that stuff and microplastics, it's got to be filtration because there's just so much of it. You're not going to suck it all out of the Great Lakes, right? I mean, it's literally called forever chemicals. And so, yeah.
Yeah, filtration is going to become more important, or some sort of treatment at the tap, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're used to our water systems taking care of all that for us. But we've seen through issues like lead that it can't always be taken care of. The lead isn't coming from the plants, but it is coming from the pipes.
Yeah.
And so all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And we really need to start thinking more forwardly about where is the best place to be treating the water for our drinking water in different situations. Probably it's probably not a one size fits all answer. But
Absolutely.
that's an important one. Mm-hmm.
I just realized with these drum rolls, we have O'Reilly saying "woo." We're supposed to do that instead of the symbol. So I will fix that for this last one. I apologize for having the wrong sound effect, but that's okay. All right, Jill Ryan, what is the number one threat to my water, my drinking water, or my swimming water, to my water in the Great Lakes? It is
The cost.
Tell me about the cost. Interesting. I like this left field answer. I was expecting, I don't even know what, liquid cancer or radiation, but the cost. Tell me about the cost.
Well, all of the things we've been talking about, anything that can get into our water supplies, anything in our pipes that are causing us to have to change pipes, all of these things cost more money.
Yeah.
And our federal government used to pay well over 70% of the costs of our drinking water systems. Now they pay around 7%. So all of those costs are being devolved down to the customer. And every time we have to install one of those new pricey filtration systems or new pipes for everybody that has a lead pipe, it's a big cost. And what we know is there are many people in our country unable to afford their water. And when we say afford, what we mean is there's an EPA standard and a United Nations standard. And we like to think that for those people, 200% of the federal poverty level or below, they should not pay more than 3% of their income for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. Unfortunately, in some places, including places like Detroit, some people are paying 25% of their income monthly.
Goodness gracious.
For their water bill. Yeah, it's really atrocious. And there have recent studies show that right now, up to a third of families in the United States cannot actually afford their water by this standard. And so what happens then is we lose access to water. Utilities will shut water off after you can't pay your bill. They also will put that bill on your tax bill. And if you can't pay the tax bill, they'll take your home. So this is a huge problem for families living in not just the Great Lakes region, but the whole country. The issues that we have with our source water and getting it to our homes are making water unaffordable. And we have to find new solutions so that everyone has access to tap water, no exceptions. And so I think that's one of our biggest issues, because if we really care about water and we want it to be cared for into the future, we have to ensure that people can access it and access it in a way that doesn't create other hardships in their household.
And the Great Lakes are a source of drinking water for over 40 million people.
And that's before Arizona comes for the water. Anyway, different episode. You can listen to that one too. This is actually really interesting, and I'm so glad that you've shared I'm so exist in a world in which you've shared with us the top 5 threats to our water, but now I'm not going to sleep tonight.
And if you want to learn more about these issues that they've talked about, go back to their website, and they have a tab for issues, and you can click on each of these areas and learn more about them.
And then click on the University of Texas Burnt Orange.
And donate some.
Donate some money to help take it. I mean, the cost is real. A lot of our listeners are students and things like that. So students stay in school and study hard. So eventually they'll have the money to click on that yellow button or that orange button. Red button, else. It's not that hard. But that's actually not why we invited you here on Teach Me About the Great Lakes this week. The reason that we invited you on Teach Me About the Great Lakes is to ask 2 questions. The first of which is this. If you could have a great donut for breakfast or a great sandwich for lunch, Ann, which would you choose?
Well, I have to say a donut for breakfast.
Donut picker. How about that? All right, so I'm going to go to Petoskey, Michigan, wherever that is.
Well,
and I'm going to get a good donut.
Can I cheat and pick another
Yes.
town? So I have to say that the best donut you can find in the Great Lakes region would be in Jackson, Michigan, which is a little far from a Great Lake because it's in the middle of the state.
That's a Great Lakes state. That's fine.
But it's still in the Great Lakes state. And you'd go to Hinckley Bakery and you would get a chocolate crescent.
Yum.
Yeah, they are delicious. They have been voted as one of the best donuts in the state or the best donut in the state. But you should go.
Jill, are you a sandwich or a donut person?
Well, I'm really going to throw a wrench in things because I can't have gluten.
Oh,
So I would pick tacos.
Okay.
That is my favorite lunch.
There it is. All right, where am I going to get a good taco? In Michigan or wherever?
Jose's restaurant in Petoskey. Without, hands down. Yeah.
Yum.
Write it down. Love a good taco. I spent a lot of time, spent a bunch of years in Texas, and so got into tacos. In fact, a friend of mine is in Texas every now and again undergoing some medical stuff, and I've been sending them all of my Texas taco recommendations. So,
Nice.
But now I'm going to send Jose's Tacos.
And they are still open, so.
Hey,
That is good to hear because I would be devastated if Jose closed.
yeah, this would be a bleak episode.
Yes. So Ann, back to you. Is there a special place in the Great Lakes that you'd like to share with our audience, and what makes it special?
Well, it's hard to pick just one, right? There's just so many special places. But because I live in northern Michigan, there is a really spectacular beach just south of Wilderness State Park in northwestern Emmett County called Sturgeon Bay. Part of it is part of Wilderness State Park, and it's just a really beautiful beach, piping plovers nest there. And it's just a great spot to go later in the summer for a swim once it's warmed up a little bit.
Sounds like somewhere to add to our list of places that we will visit one day.
I am writing it down now.
What about you, Jill? Is there any special place in the Great Lakes that you'd like to share, and what makes it special?
Yeah. Like Ann, it's really difficult to pick, but I just moved back to my hometown, which is Muskegon, Michigan, and that is right on Lake Michigan and has a natural port of Muskegon Lake attached. And I just think the beaches and the water resources here are really unparalleled. This is, we have the largest public beach, the longest public beach on the lake, on Lake Michigan. Wow. And it's just amazing to go there and have access to these huge white sand beaches. Many people think you only see on the ocean, but they're amazing here.
That sounds beautiful. Both of the locations, they sound just amazing.
I agree. We should go to them both. In fact, what are we doing here?
Being silly.
Fair enough. Jill Ryan is the executive director and Ann Baughman, the associate director at Freshwater Future. Go visit them at freshwaterfuture.org and click on the button to see what great work they do, and then click on the button and give them money to do more of that work. It's critical stuff, right? Our water is necessary for life. We need water more than we need food.
And it should be free.
And it should be free, or at least affordable.
Yes.
I'm not sure we can advocate for radical policy change on this show as humble public servants, but
this is true.
A general good is that water should be. Anyway, Ann and Jill, thank you so much for coming on and teaching us all about the Great Lakes.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, that's a neat nonprofit. I'm so glad you identified them.
You're welcome. I'm glad that I figured out where I saw them before, because they do great work and they should be highlighted to our listeners.
Yeah. No, it's amazing to see all the important work that people are doing. And nonprofits fill an important role because the government has a lot to do. And without making comments on what they should or should not be doing, there's only so many. We need people from everywhere. We need people from government. We need nonprofits. We need businesses. We need just folks.
Everybody plays a role.
Everybody plays a role.
Teach Me About the Great Lakes is brought to you by the fine people at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. We encourage you to check out the cool stuff we do at iicgrant.org and at ILINC Grant on Facebook, Instagram, and other social medias.
Or just don't do social medias. Our senior producer is the Full Dog, and Teach Me About the Great Lakes is produced by Megan Gunn and Renie Miles. Ethan Chitty is our associate producer and our fixer. There's a lot that's broken these days. We also get a lot of help from Moti Aguyande. Thank you, Moti. Our super fun podcast artwork is by Joel Davenport, and the show is edited once she receives the files. That is by Sandra Svoboda. Her friends call her Sandy, as do I.
If you have a question or comment about the show, please email us at teachmeaboutthegreatlakes@gmail.com or leave a message on our hotline at 765-496-4474. Thanks for listening and keep grading those lakes.